This is Craig's job, firing chemicals into the clouds in a controversial attempt to modify the weather.
According to the World Meteorological Organization, 52 countries have a weather modification program. Insurance companies, like ones in Alberta, fund cloud seeding projects in order to lessen damage claims they receive.
You could do it for reducing hail. They've tried it on hurricanes to modify hurricanes, to reduce the intensity of hurricanes.
To do that, pilots target clouds full of moisture and eject small amounts of an inert chemical.
Other modification programs, experimental ones done by private companies, done by the United States government, done by states across the United States, are underway. There's more than 50 of them in operation across the United States. There are programs around the world. International corporations are modifying our weather all the time, and they're modifying it in ways that cover thousands and thousands of square miles. Most of it is chemically altered, so that what happens is that we are putting chemicals, ground-based chemicals that are shot into the air, or chemicals coming from airplanes that change and modify our weather.
Skies of blue and clouds of white, the bright blessed day, the dark sacred night, and I think to myself, what a wonderful world.
In the meantime, they are images that inspire, educate, and sometimes just make us say, wow.
Yeah.
Over the years, NASA has given us spectacular photos and renderings that reveal a colorful and mysterious universe.
No doubt. And now Chris Martinez is introducing us to two of the artists behind some of the most iconic space art in the galaxy.
In a small, bright office, working side by side,
let's see.
Robert Hurt and Tim Pyle bring the universe to life.
What we're doing does have real science underlying it.
Robert is an astrophysicist turned artist. Tim, once a Hollywood animator, is now a planet illustrator. Together, they produce some of NASA's most popular images, from renderings of how planets light years away could look, to actual photos of stars and galaxies captured by NASA's powerful telescopes.
And this is sort of how it comes to me. And then
Many of those images have a dark, grainy start, but color and light reveal an astonishing glimpse of how the deepest regions of space might appear to the human eye.
What I'm trying to do is show people sort of the broader colors that the universe has to offer.
It's a delicate blend of imagination and data. The artists meet with NASA scientists over many drafts to ensure a planet or galaxy's look lines up with the research to make each one as accurate as possible.
I love the challenge. It's kind of like a puzzle to me of trying to create something that looks really cool within the restrictions that were given by the scientists.
It can take days, even weeks, to produce just a single image. The dazzling final results, enough to keep us all dreaming of the final frontier for years to come.
After I saw the trailer, all I could think of was major propaganda for climate change. It is exactly what the Luciferian Illuminati establishment wants us to believe. They are using the big screen TV, video games, cartoons, TV shows, what have you, to push this same agenda of climate change, and that there's going to be some kind of disaster that is coming. And I honestly believe, without a doubt, that they are going to be the ones that engineer it. So if we look at some screenshots and what even IMDb is talking about, I will show you some information as to what I believe is being shown here. And anyways, IMDb says, when the network of satellites designed to control the global climate, and in my opinion, the worldwide climate, there's no such thing as a globe, start to attack Earth, it's a race against the clock to uncover the real threat before a worldwide geostorm wipes out everything and everyone. So take note that it says, basically these satellites get taken over. So literally showing now there's climate terrorists or people that are taking over these satellites or supposed satellites, because we will see that really many people know that satellites are also fake. They're not real. And basically saying that this is a geostorm, which is totally a man-made engineered kind of thing that is being shown here. And, really when we look at some screenshots here, we will see that the Illuminati signature is everywhere as the trailer begins with scenes of lightning in the sky, to me denoting symbolism for Lucifer's fall from heaven. Are we also being shown whose people are behind this fear propaganda, aka Lucifer and his minions are behind this propaganda for major climate change agenda propaganda. In the trailer, we see not only is it propaganda for climate change, but more space deception as well. The establishment really wants humanity to believe in climate change, to believe in space, to believe in evolution, to believe in all this nonsense that is just all lies, but it's really all CGI fakery. And sadly, the world has just bought up and eaten up this fakery that we're being shown constantly. So here we see a scene of a rocket ship going up into space, which is again just all nonsense. And as we keep going, we see this rocket ship apparently going to this supposed International Space Station, but really NASA and the establishment really want you to believe in space station. The funny thing is, how does the ISS even keep up with the Earth if, according to their numbers, we're spinning at 1,000 miles per hour, and we're also supposedly hurtling through space at 66,000 miles per hour? So how do all the supposed satellites even keep up with us? How can they even do anything up there if we're spinning so fast, if we're hurtling through space so fast? But we don't even see any satellites in any of the supposed pictures of Earth from space. When we take a look at some of this stuff, we'll see that the Earth really should look like this. If we're truly on a globe and there's thousands of satellites up there, we should be seeing pictures like this. Or that, of course, this is good old CGI again, but there should be satellites all over the place.
Now, I don't want to fool you here. Last month, for the first time since 1972, NASA released a blue marble, a single snapshot of the Earth taken from outer space. And so much has changed in the decades between that first picture and the second. Borders have shifted, generations have come and gone. Our global population has nearly doubled. But one thing hasn't changed. Our planet is as beautiful as ever. It still looks blue.
In 2002, Blue Marble 2.0, NASA's Rob Simon made this. And it had wide appeal too. For example, it ended up as the default background on the iPhone.
I didn't even know until I bought an iPhone and turned it on and kind of did a little happy dance.
Simon's job is...
It's primarily taking data and making pictures out of it.
That's what this is, a composite of data sets from several different instruments translated into a picture.
To us, the really cool thing was the data set. Up until that point, there was no realistic color map of the globe anywhere.
So the land layer here comes from
the moderate resolution imaging spectroradiometer aboard Terra.
And the tricky part here was the weather.
So we actually had to take clouds out.
They stashed the clouds for later, went onto the ocean. That came from an instrument that measures phytoplankton in the sea.
Where it was low, I colored it dark blue because they're low mostly in mid-oceans. And then where it's a little bit higher, it was like a little bit brighter green.
Then add the clouds back in.
There's a small problem with it because there's a very slight gap in between each orbit.
So some of those are painted on.
It is photoshopped, but it's has to be.
Then
there was another layer to sort of simulate the atmosphere.
And then there's this little bright spot.
It's called the specular highlight. So it's the reflection of sunlight off of water.
Those are the pieces, but you can't just slap them all together.
It just didn't look realistic. It looks kind of flat, or the clouds are sort of too see-through. So I just hit Command-Z a lot.
There's artistry to creating the world.
What I imagine it to be. Unfortunately, I'm not an astronaut. I've never been to space. But I've looked at these images over and over again, trying to sort of get the essence of it. It is photoshopped, but it's has to be. It is photoshopped, but it's has to be.
But that's just not the case, because when you look at these there's NASA's logo right there, official NASA photos of the Earth. Of course, we see the stupid ball nonsense and whatever. Where are the satellites? They are just nowhere to be seen. So this should tell you something, that there are no such things as satellites. There's no such thing as this ball Earth, this globe Earth nonsense. Sadly, the Earth, or the people, the majority of the people have eaten up this ball Earth stuff, and I really hope that people start waking up as to what is truly going on here. Satellites are purely science fiction. All supposed images of satellites in orbit show fake CGI satellites orbiting a fake CGI ball Earth, first conceived by Freemason science fiction author Arthur C. Clarke, who we've spoken about many times, written books like 2001: A Space Odyssey, Good Old Childhood Zen, all that kind of thing. They claim satellites became science facts soon after he, spoke about this back in 1945.
According to Vatican Radio, Francis said, if, for example, tomorrow an expedition of Martians came, and some of them came to us, and one says, but I want to be baptized, what would happen? In other words, says The Wire, if God prompts some Martians to come to Earth, find the Pope, and say, we want in on this Catholicism thing, the Pope would probably say, okay, cool, but probably in Latin. The Pope was making the point that baptism shouldn't be denied to anyone, including children of unmarried parents. We're guessing he wasn't totally serious about the aliens part, because after all, he's been known to ditch his prepared speeches in favor of a joke before. After his election, he reportedly turned to his cardinals and deadpanned, may God forgive you for what you have done. He once quipped he was the church's pharmacist whose job it was to prescribe prayer. Joking aside, it's worth noting Pope Francis isn't alone in his compassion toward extraterrestrial life. The Vatican's astronomer said a few years ago he'd baptize a Martian because any entity, no matter how many tentacles it has a soul.
A three-part show on Sci-Fi Channel portrays a curious scenario set in the future. Childhood's End is a television show based on the 1953 novel by the great Arthur C. Clarke, a science fiction writer. Sci-Fi Channel decided to air a show that depicts alien disclosure, the arrival of a satanic look-alike, and the eventual destruction of the world by fire. The themes contained in Childhood's End show an agenda is underway. It has been for quite some time. Clarke's novel is centered around an alien disclosure, where an armada of alien vessels make contact with the Earth. The aliens claim that they have come for the purpose of assisting humanity through a golden age, a utopia, a time of peace, security, and prosperity for all upon the Earth. Not all of the people accept this utopia. Some of them protest because they believe in the God of Scripture. In the show, one of the characters' mothers kills herself because of the disclosure. She views her faith in God as incompatible with disclosure of alien life. Despite these people, these protesters, a vast majority of the world is accepting of the utopia, and many abandon whatever faith they once had in the notion of God. The aliens and the people of Earth commonly refer to this time period of peace and prosperity on the Earth as the golden age of humanity. Literally, that's what they say repeatedly throughout the show. People never seem to get sick in this golden age. There is no war either. There is one who is appointed as the supervisor of Earth, one who helps to usher in the golden age of humanity. His name is Corellin. For many years, the people of Earth never see him. Eventually, they do see him when he is unveiled. Corellin tells one of the characters the reason why he does not disclose his appearance to the people of Earth. It's because they are not ready to accept what he looks like. But later in the show, he is revealed. What's interesting about his depiction in the show is that it is different from the way he is depicted in the book. In fact, a New York Post article wrote that the director of the show intentionally manipulated Corellin's look, changing him from an alien profile to a character that literally looks like a rendering of Satan. When Corellin is unveiled to humanity, he looks suspiciously like the unveiling of the Satanic statue in Detroit. In fact, Corellin, the supervisor of Earth, is 9 feet tall and flanked by 2 children when he is unveiled, a girl on the left and a boy on the right. The Satanic statue is also 9 feet tall, with 2 children on the side of Satan, a girl on the left and a boy on the right. Both the statue and the scene in Childhood's End depict the children looking up to the Satanic character with longing, with great admiration.
But, for thousands of years, planets were known as wandering stars, as they differ from the fixed stars in their relative motions only. Okay, and then we'll see as we keep going down here, we'll talk some more about, the stuff that's going on. The modern atheist, Big Bang, heliocentric globe, Earth, chance evolution paradigm spiritually controls humanity by removing God or any sort of intelligent design and replacing purposeful divine creation with haphazard, random cosmic coincidence. NASA is the biggest black budget black hole in existence, sucking over $30 billion in taxpayer money for the fake moon landings alone. Okay, but there's so much more that they are doing here, and it even says here, by removing Earth from the motionless center of the universe, these Masons have moved us physically and metaphysically from a place of supreme importance to one of complete nihilistic indifference. If the Earth is the center of the universe, then the ideas of God, creation, and a purpose for human existence are resplendent. But if the Earth is just one of billions of planets revolving around billions of stars and billions of galaxies, then the ideas of God, creation, and a scientific purpose for Earth and human existence become highly implausible. So really the same, because this is really just sun worship. They want to make us seem like we're insignificant and that there's nothing to us, but really that is completely a lie as to what they want us to believe. So check out this article for yourself. Also another great article from Plane, Not a Planet, also talking about how satellites don't exist, and it's actually talking specific about this Arthur C. Clarke and this fraud that he was. The origin of satellites came from the minds of famous science fiction writer Arthur C. Clarke. So he was a high-level Freemason as well as a homosexual and self-professed pedophile. Throw in Satanism and you've got one heck of a guy.
Hello? There is no need to be afraid.
It is Corellin who will be overseeing the Golden Age, the evolution of humanity, and the transition to peace and prosperity. He has an interest in the children of Earth. It's later revealed that these children are no longer the property of humanity and are not fully human anyway. They are taken away from their human parents. The parents are left to face the apocalypse. Occult symbols are put on display throughout the show. First off, Corellin has the ability to manipulate and control time and space. He does this on many occasions for the purpose of ensuring that humanity enters the Golden Age without any issues. There are multiple references to the fact that Corellin and the alien invaders are assisting humanity through evolution towards a higher state of consciousness. These aliens are called the Overlords, and they have been on Earth once before.
Why do they look like demons? Like our exact idea of devils. They look like our idea of devils because they've been here before. We've been waiting for them. We knew they were coming, so when they brought about this change, it scared us on some deep level because we could never stop it. A relationship between all living things and the stars themselves. Perhaps we've always known the Overlords were coming.
Okay, so because of some crackpot ancient philosophy, we knew they were coming to do good. So then why turn them into the personification of evil?
Humanity has waited expectantly for them to return. They are not on Earth for the purpose of destroying the Earth, but to do good. They happen to look like the human conception of demons, but according to one character, humanity has incorrectly associated these creatures with evil. Other occult symbols like the eye, the pyramid, the as above so below repeat references to the Golden Age. These symbols show up on multiple occasions. In one scene, we see a man is saved from being shot when the supervisor of Earth, Corellin, intervenes and completely halts the dimension of time. After this, Corellin opens a door, a way out, a way for this character to escape the crisis he is in. Behind the door is a paradise, and the man decides to walk through the door. Both of my channels have focused on the use of doors as a symbol, how doors are used to portray when constraints of time and space have been overcome. Here it is Corellin who has manipulated these dimensions.
So he is known for writing these science fiction stories, and basically there was a 7-year overlap between 1945 to 52 when Jack Parsons, Ron Hubbard, and Arthur C. Clarke were all alive and were witness to the science fiction industry exploding onto the eager minds of young people. I find the Roswell crash in 47 quite timely, and it certainly propelled the interest of space to many media levels. Hollywood didn't miss the cue since they're owned by the Khazarian Rothschilds, go figure. Hollywood started cranking out sci-fi movies by the truckload. At the top of the sci-fi movie heap was the great undiscovered frontier, good old space. So really that's what they want us to be infatuated with, is this space propaganda, all this kind of nonsense.
Can you tell me what this means? Jennifer, what do you see?
I see all. The end begins.
The man who questions the little girl is holding the all-seeing eye with a pyramid. We also see the Eye of Ra and a $1 bill that is flipped over. The director was intentional here, portraying the Novus Ordo Secularum right before the little girl named Jennifer says, quote, "I see all," unquote. Jennifer is the living human form of the eye, the advent of the eye and human flesh. She is the one who destroys the earth at the end, while Corellin is depicted as attempting to save species of animals off of the earth before its destruction. He takes these animals in his spaceship back to his home planet, where they will be preserved. Childhood's End shows the eventual destruction of Earth with fire. The utopia that all of humanity accepted didn't last. The era of peace and safety ended in decimation.
Interestingly, to see that Hollywood is owned by the Rothschilds, by the Illuminati, so definitely their propaganda is in full effect and full swing. So when you talk about satellites, again, not only do we not see real pictures of the Earth ever, but even the pictures of satellites that we are shown are all fake. This is all CGI. This is not real. Do not believe any of this garbage that NASA puts out. This is complete fakery. None of this is real. Do you really believe that this thing is just floating out there? Okay, this is just all nonsense. This is all fake. Do not believe the lies that we are being told, because these people are Freemasons, they are sun worshippers, they are Illuminati, they worship the sun, they worship Lucifer. So it makes it's no surprise that they put the sun at the center of the universe when it should be the earth, when we are God's creation. We are the zenith, we are the pinnacle. Humanity is the pinnacle of God's creation. So do not believe the lies of NASA, of mainstream science. They are just pushing this space agenda because they want us to believe that that they are in control, that Lucifer is in control.
Don't worry if you can't hear what I'm saying. I couldn't even hear myself. This is the loudest sound you could possibly conceive. And as it turns out, the cleanest. Now, the most amazing thing is that that cloud up there, which was generated by the engine, is just a mixture of hydrogen and oxygen. It's water vapor. And in about an hour's time, someone in Mississippi is going to get wet washing. It will actually rain. I told you. It's raining! That's unbelievable! Oh, NASA's playing God! It's making its own weather!
Project Cirrus, a massive operation jointly conducted in 1947 with the General Electric Laboratory, the Office of Naval Research, the U.S. Weather Bureau, the U.S. Army Signal Corps, and the Air Force. And as newspaper articles described, during Project Cirrus, they sprayed silver iodide into a hurricane in 1947. And they did so when the hurricane was a couple days out from the East Coast trajectory, and it worked. After successfully seeding the hurricane, it changed directions and accelerated, crashing into the coast of Savannah, Georgia, wreaking major havoc on its inhabitants, destroying property, and creating an inquiry in Congress, who seemed largely critical and quite perturbed at the supposition that steering this hurricane had artificially fueled it and created a loose cannon with disturbing potential consequences. The public at large was furious, lawsuits were formed, and the DoD was suddenly on the defensive. Official denials came down, attempting to quell public anger and diffuse blame. A 13-year moratorium was placed on weather experimentation, and the key players went back to the drawing board. But Irving Langmuir openly took credit for manipulating the weather and boasted about its success, tone-deaf to the sentiments of the public, and apparently callous to the collateral damage that this new technology was capable of wielding. During that same year, Project Cirrus also tested, quote, cloud controls to modify winter weather in the northern U.S., and Dr. Langmuir announced that he was working to prevent hailstorms during thunderstorms, the stopping of all ice storms, the freezing of rain, and cloud icing that endangers flying. Furthermore, in an April 1947 experiment that echoed the fictionalized Ice 9 of Kurt Vonnegut's novel, Langmuir described to the press his attempts at cloud cutting in the northern New York and Massachusetts Berkshire mountain country. It was done in a cloud filled with unfrozen moisture that had been chilled to below freezing by artificially induced chemical reactions, namely by dropping some 25 pounds of dry ice from a plane into the cloud, which in turn could transform into snow or rain. The plane flew an L-shaped course, and the color of the L changed within a few minutes. Its moisture turned into snow, some of which at first boiled upwards. This kind of snow would not ice an airplane. Soon the snow fell and the L changed into a canyon in the cloud. In 30 minutes, this canyon was 1,000 feet deep. This canyon widened and lengthened rapidly. It cut completely down through the cloud and was about 3 miles wide and lengthened to 15 miles.
In an interview aired by CBS, Dr. Kaku admitted that recent homemade hurricanes have been the result of government weather modification programs in which the skies were sprayed with nanoparticles and storms, then activated through the use of lasers. It says in an interview below, Michio discusses the history of weather modifications before CBS crews stop him in his tracks. The High Frequency Active Auroral Research Program, HAARP, was created in the early 1990s as part of the ionospheric research program jointly funded by the U.S. Air Force, the U.S. Navy, the University of Alaska Fairbanks, and the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, DARPA. According to government officials, HAARP allows the military to modify and weaponize the weather by triggering earthquakes, floods, and hurricanes.
They were talking about climate change yesterday, and now we're learning that scientists and researchers are looking at how to change the weather on purpose. That's right, lasers now could one day manipulate rain and lightning.
Tonight we begin a News 12 special series, Remembering 9/11. With the 10th anniversary approaching, we're going to take a look back at the terror attacks that changed America forever. Now, you may not be aware, a hurricane was forecast for New York that fateful day, a storm that could have conceivably changed history. News 12 meteorologist Joe Rayo is here with Remembering 9/11. Joe.
Well, absolutely, Brian. You know, the weather has played a crucial role in many historical events, from D-Day to the explosion of the Space Shuttle Challenger. And tonight, in the wake of Hurricane Irene, ironically enough, how another storm may have made a difference. For on the day before 9/11, all eyes were focused on a major hurricane. From here on Chopper 12, we have access to spectacular panoramic views of the greater New York metropolitan area. And these scenes are enhanced on this particular morning by the weather. Indeed, it's the kind of day that meteorologists might categorize as severe clear. And now, still under construction, yet looming large in our view, is One World Trade Center. You know, seeing this particular edifice against these blue skies is a haunting reminder of the weather conditions on that tragic day 10 years ago. A gorgeous morning in late summer. But had the weather been just a little different, the tragic events that we now associate with the date September 11, 2001 might never have happened. The day before 9/11, over the greater New York area, skies were turbulent with extensive cloud cover accompanied by scattered showers. I remember that day very well. I was here at News 12 doing my evening weathercast and showing our viewers satellite images of a very powerful storm, a Category 3 hurricane, Hurricane Erin, which was moving on a track that would take it, perhaps the next day, right into the tri-state metropolitan area. Notice also the movement. It's moving toward the northwest, and if it were to keep on moving, it would be heading right toward Long Island and southern New England, but it's not going to do that. But then I pointed out that the cold front that was moving through our area would ultimately push Erin away from the East Coast. Will be turned around and moved to the north and northeast, out of the picture for us as this cold front comes on in and through, and for all intents and purposes, just boom, kicks Erin right on out to sea. I was actually happy to tell our viewers that we were going to dodge a major weather bullet, that the hurricane was going to veer away from the eastern seaboard, that September 11th was going to be a beautiful day, blue skies and bright sunshine. In retrospect, maybe it would have been better if we had to deal with the hurricane. The front moves through, less humid air moves in, and sunshine. You know, if that cold front had been just 24 to 36 hours slower than it was, the weather on 9/11 might have been much different than it turned out to be.
Don't believe it. So as we keep going, we'll see, really good, more CGI fakery in this movie, because NASA and the establishment really want you to believe this is real. You got to hand it to them, really. They do a really good job with their CGI. Even in this movie, this looks, very real. But, when I saw this, immediately I saw the 6-pointed cube star. Can you see it? There's 6 sides to this shape here. You can see these 6 lines making basically the Rothschild Star of Remphan, the star what people think is the Star of David. It's just not. It really is a complete Jesuit Illuminati Khazarian Rothschild deception that is going on here. So right away you can see the cube of Saturn. This is what is really being shown here. They're showing their signature, okay, the cube or the cult of Saturn, the IXXI. It is all cube, Saturn, Sun worship. Satan worship is what is being shown here. So don't be fooled. They put their signatures in plain sight. So really, yet again, we are seeing who is in control of Hollywood, of the media. It is the Illuminati cabal. That is what's going on here. And later on we see, to me, what looks like the bottom of the satellite literally looks like the womb of Isis is opening up, and the Illuminati is about to release their plan. So is the Luciferian establishment wants to blame humanity for climate change. Funny that they're the ones that are engineering this climate change through this, geostorm or this geoengineering of theirs, but they want to blame humanity. Go figure. But in reality, this movie is revealing just who is behind climate change. Don't fall for the lies that humanity is destroying the world. It's just not real, okay? It truly is the establishment who's destroying this world, because we have seen, I've shown this article in the video I did recently on that movie, The Thinning. This article talks about human population growth and climate change. They really want to say that it's human population that is destroying the atmosphere, that we're breathing out too much carbon dioxide and creating too much of greenhouse gases, when the funny thing is the earth actually needs greenhouse gases. So it's all Luciferian lunacy, if you ask me. And then of course, I showed before an article about HAARP, talking about that it's basically a secret weapon for weather modification. And you can again take a look at this article for yourself. But really, they actually acknowledge that the experiments are conducted using electromagnetic frequencies to fire pulse-directed energy beams in order to temporarily excite a limited area of the ionosphere. So they are totally messing with the weather.
This facility was built by the Air Force about 20 years ago to study the ionosphere, to do active experiments in the ionosphere. The ionosphere is a layer that surrounds the Earth at about 100 kilometers up to maybe 2,000 kilometers. It's important for a lot of things, like satellite communication. Any kind of radio signals that pass through the ionosphere are affected by the ionosphere. Each of these trailers you see around me have transmitters in them. The transmitters feed power from the main building over there up into these dipole antennas. And basically there are 180 antennas radiating high frequency waves up in the ionosphere. It's a big ham radio, a big HF radio, the biggest in the world. Fundamentally what this is about is taking the ionosphere at 100 kilometers up and turning it into a laboratory. We can do experiments. We can create bubbles. We can heat small sections. We can create waves. We can excite plasma resonances and do a lot of experiments. We can transmit signals all around the world. We can study effects of the ionosphere. It basically makes the ionosphere a laboratory, and we can do experiments that no one else can do. It's a laboratory without walls.
They are the ones that are doing this kind of nonsense. So really, they want to blame humanity, but the establishment are the ones that are doing it. So it is, again, the Hegelian dialectic. They like to make it seem like we're doing it, even the duality, as above, so below. It's exactly how Satan works, He's the one doing the nonsense, but of course he lies. He's the father of lies, and they follow in his footsteps. So they're going to do the exact same things. And even, of course, good old Wernher von Braun spoke about this when he said that, talking about the weaponization of space and space-based weapons and all this kind of thing. So really, this is nothing new under the sun here. We are being shown the same things over and over again, that they have these weapons. Even though people like myself and others who believe this are labeled as conspiracy theorists, but really they like to make people like us look very crazy. But that's just not the case, in my opinion, that the Illuminati cabal, they are the ones behind all of this. Many of us know that Wernher von Braun was a high-level Freemason and part of the Nazi regime as well, who was brought over to America by good old Project Paperclip so that they could continue his Luciferian work. And of course, he's the founder, or one of the founding members of NASA. So, they are the ones that are destroying the Earth.
Dr. Agnew experienced the power of ELF waves firsthand back in the 1980s. He was hired by an energy company to locate oil and gas using the same kind of ELF waves at much lower frequencies to carry out his search. It's a process called Earth tomography. But during one particular incident, Dr. Agnew believes his use of HAARP-like ELF waves accidentally triggered an earthquake.
It was in the spring of 1987 we arrived in Roseburg, Oregon to use our ELF technology to search for oil and gas. Setting up that day, we had a little bit different results than we expected, because the instant that we energized it, there was between a 4 and 4.5 on the Richter scale earthquake that occurred. We were so amazed about what seemed to be cause and effect We get to an area that has a high propensity for earthquakes, in an area known as the megathrust of the Pacific Northwest. We turn it on, and an earthquake occurs.
Dr. Agnew demonstrates how he may have triggered the quake.
This is a scale model of what the area looked like in Oregon when we scanned for oil and gas in 1987. This strata right here represents the megathrust area underneath the ground. The rock represents the potential energy set up in the ground from a tectonic stress. What we're going to do is introduce ELF waves and demonstrate that it can in fact trigger an earthquake.
In this case, Dr. Agnew is using a stereo speaker to produce the ELF waves needed for his demonstration.
ELF waves, extremely low frequency waves, are just like a subwoofer. In your car, you can actually feel the vibrations through your body. ELF waves are the same way. They vibrate the earth, and at right resonant frequencies, they can have devastating effects.
When the speaker is activated, ELF waves begin to emit. Tiny vibrations in the sand are detected. Then a few seconds later, the rock representing the fault line shifts.
As you can see, in a very few seconds, the resonant frequency built up in our model released the potential energy in the rock. That concussion, on a real scale, would have been felt for 100 miles. These conditions are already set up in the ground. All it takes is the activation energy to make the release happen. This is a small scale, and we're only using 30 watts in this scale.
When HAARP's broadcast array in Gakona, Alaska sends pulses of ELF waves into the ionosphere, the waves get reflected back down and pass through the Earth and ocean. If 3.6 million watts of ELF waves were purposely or accidentally aimed at an already unstable fault line, it could, according to Dr. Agnew, cause a tremendous earthquake.
We also showed this article from that, video on the thing, talking about how the companies are destroying, places like Congo just for the sake of getting the mineral that is used for cell phones and electronics. So really, the establishment, the companies are destroying this world. So that's really who is doing all this kind of thing. So again, do not be fooled. Okay, this is exactly what they are doing, but they like to blame humanity as if humanity is the problem. But we are not the problem. It is the establishment, the Illuminati, Jesuit, Khazarian, Zionists, whatever you want to call them. They are the ones that are causing the problem. They are the true cancer in this world, this new world order system that is coming. And of course, we start seeing, good old crazy scenes of tornadoes and crazy climate chaos that's coming. Here comes the engineered climate chaos. Lucifer's people want people to think that they control all the weather, but really it's only God that controls the weather. Abba Yahweh is the one that is in control. He is the one that created this world. But really, this message has already been planted into our minds about climate chaos. Do you remember who planted this in our minds about climate chaos? I'm sure you'll remember the good old French foreign minister back in May of 2014 made his prediction that 500 days to avoid climate chaos. Okay, what Foreign Minister Laurent Fabius has said, alongside the Secretary of State, and of course they had their good old climate summit and all that kind of nonsense in Paris later in 2015. So they have been putting this into our heads for a long time, that even though the 500 days came and went, it was supposed to end on September 23rd of 2015, that infamous date, and of course nothing happened. But what they really, I believe, in my opinion, wanted to happen was to put it into people's minds that the climate is going crazy, that things are changing, that the temperature is rising, and that we're all going to die because the climate is going to go crazy and chaos is coming and all this kind of nonsense. That is what they want us to believe.
And the reason ice floats is that water has a peculiar property of being at the greatest density at 4 degrees centigrade. And I have a little blue iceberg here that I'm going to float in a volume of water. Nearly overflow, capsize the iceberg. Okay, settle down. I'm going to fill this up to nearly overflowing. As the ice melts, the volume does not increase of the ice-water combination, and so none of the water will spill out. And that makes sense if you realize that as the water melts, its density increases because it's turning back into liquid water. Okay, so here the ice is gone and we've got no spillage whatsoever.
They have planted this thought in the minds of humanity that one day climate chaos is coming. Even though it didn't come on September 23rd, 2015, still, they are still pushing this agenda. And of course, who else was a big proponent of climate change was good old Barack Obama. And some of his famous quotes, or I should say nonsense quotes that he would say was, "We will respond to the threat of climate change knowing that the failure to do so would betray our children and future generations." So he likes to act like he cares for children, but yet he authorizes Planned Parenthood. He's all for abortion, but yet he wants to talk about children. He really doesn't give a crap about your children. Just, you know, if I can maybe put it bluntly, he doesn't care. So he's just pushing an agenda, a Luciferian agenda. He's also been quoted as saying, "And no challenge poses a greater threat to future generations than climate change." Really? So, you know, people starving in the streets, that's not a threat. Or all these, you know, fake wars that are going on, that's not a threat. Or all these people, you know, undergoing, you know, horrible family lives, or people that are starving in the world. This doesn't mean anything to you. But climate change, climate change, that is a big problem. That's, you know, these people are lunatics because they are Luciferians. They are part of the Luciferian cabal, and they are the same ones behind the same propaganda that is being shown to us over and over and over again. So the Luciferian world elite wants you to believe this nonsense. They are the ones who are geoengineering climate change for a very specific purpose.
When you have water vapor and you have dust particles or ice crystals, you can precipitate rain. It condenses around the seeds. These seeds can also be created by laser beams. By firing trillion-watt lasers, you rip apart the electrons, creating what are called ions, and these ions act like seeds, like dust particles, bringing down rain and even lightning.
Go ahead.
Well, this fascinates me in part because, too, I remember reading the stories that China had used this during the Olympics, that the USSR had used this after Chernobyl to create rain clouds. I mean, did those really work then? We have some of these capabilities now?
Inconclusive. Even in the 60s, the CIA used this to bring down monsoons during the Vietnam War.
Work then? We have some of these capabilities now?
Inconclusive. Even in the 60s, the CIA used this to bring down monsoons during the Vietnam War, to wash out the Viet Cong, Governments have been playing with this thing.
Alleged to.
Alleged to, right.
Yeah.
Now, we realize that for decades now, these governments have been alleged to have experimented with weather control, but nothing conclusive. This time we're bringing in the laws of physics rather than simply waving our hands and uttering mumbo jumbo. We're actually using trillion-watt lasers now.
Laser at a power of 1 watt. And if you don't want to use your energy to strike your match, you can just hold it in the beam of light.
A 1 watt laser can light a match. Imagine then the power of a 500 trillion watt laser. That's exactly what they've built here at the National Ignition Facility in California, where engineers have just finished constructing the laser to end all lasers. In fact, 192 of the world's most powerful lasers, all focused on a tiny hydrogen target. If they can be made to strike at the same time, and when I say the same time, I mean within 1/billionth of a second, then the energy inside the atoms will be released, creating in one moment 500 times more energy than the entire American national grid. This incredible energy release is from nuclear fusion.
What is fusion power?
Well, fusion power is what's going on inside the sun, right? You know, and that is when we crush hydrogen together, we get this fusion to happen, we turn mass into energy, and that energy comes out, and if we can collect it and turn it into electricity, that's what we want to power our civilization. We get this fusion to happen, we turn mass into energy, and that energy comes out, and if we can collect it and turn it into electricity, that's what we want to power our civilization.
And in the laboratory, sure enough, they precipitate rain out of water vapor. Sure enough, you can actually bring down electricity down the beam. So what is electricity down the beam?
And I will tell you what I believe that purpose is, at least in my opinion. Again, you don't have to believe me. I always say do your own research and come to your own conclusions, but I will tell you what I believe is the reason behind all of this. And, you know, we see more scenes of major devastation and destruction that are taking place everywhere because, as we've been shown in many movies before, the New World Order needs to destroy the old world in order to bring in the new world. That is what they show constantly. They love to show death and destruction all over the place because they have to bring in their new world.
Where's Caleb?
Caleb's safe.
We're going to stay on the air for as long as possible. All we can say is what we've been repeating all morning. Get to any kind of underground shelter. We've been told the satellite could. So far, that's up. That's pretty far.
This isn't the end, son.
I know.
So here we see lightning bolts all over the place. To me, more of Lucifer's signature here, falling like lightning from heaven. We see this lightning falling all over the place in this scene. So, of course, good old Luciferian programming here. Then we see, you know, the Illuminati's geoengineering storm is all coming for humanity. It really is coming, apart from ushering in the New World Order. Why do you think this is constantly being shown? Why is there all this talk of climate change? You know,
the world's first airborne directed energy weapon, the airborne laser, also known as the ABL. Just mounting the ABL requires one of the most sophisticated and elaborate modifications in history. The entire nose section is removed and retrofitted, and the world's largest titanium plate is installed to hold the enormous turret-mounted laser in place. The ABL system is designed to find, track, and destroy an enemy target in the air and on the ground. It can loiter at 40,000 feet for 5 hours, refuel in midair, and destroy a target 60 miles away in less than a second.
Lasers sound like the stuff of science fiction, right? Sound completely unbelievable. How could our military possibly be using those in future warfare? Guess what? We've just had a recent breakthrough, more great test results that are making lasers a reality. So it's called Athena. Lockheed Martin makes it, and they've been doing a lot of the pioneering in this laser field. Now, what's really exciting about it is that it's so hard to harness that much power and make it compact enough that it's actually going to make practical sense downrange. And they've proven that they can do that. Recently, they tested it against 5 moving drones, so realistic drones that they might go up against with, enemy forces might send against us, for example, or terrorists might send against us. And it successfully shot down all 5 of the drones. This is huge news because it means that in a realistic, practical setting, it's looking very promising. So it could be ready to field quite soon. So when you see the movies or you look at comic books or television shows, when you see laser weapons, they tend to be a color, right? Red or green or something like that. Real lasers, one of the key advantages that they provide is that they are invisible. You actually can't see them. You just see this damage suddenly starting to blow something up. So if we take a look now at what the Athena did to a truck. So we're looking at a truck engine, and the Athena within seconds was able to beam right in there, heat the whole thing up, and burn through the engine of this vehicle. So if you can imagine if you were in that vehicle, all of a sudden, this hole would start appearing in your engine, and the whole thing would just disappear. That's what these lasers do. Now, there's some other key advantages that we should mention. Let me give you 3 of them. 1, unlimited ammo. As long as we have power, we have an unlimited magazine. And downrange, of course, having unlimited ammo can be a huge advantage. Second, it's silent. You don't give the enemy any advance warning that it's coming. And then the third one I wanted to touch on is that it travels at the speed of light. So not only are we delivering powerful, decisive effects, lethality, we're also doing it so rapidly they don't know what hit them. So if you could circle back to that example of being in the car again, that would happen so instantaneously, within seconds, you truly would have no idea what was happening. It would just suddenly start disintegrating, right? So what can we use these against? So we talked about the vehicle a bit. We talked about how Athena has just proven itself against drones. But in the real world application, our forces could use it against the drones. We could use it against aircraft. We could use it against vehicles on the ground, like we mentioned. We could also use it against fast attack boats. And in fact, Athena's sibling, Adam, a couple years ago proved that it could eliminate these fast attack boats. So if you imagine boats start trying to swarm one of our ships, not a problem for this laser. Burns right through the hull. As you can see right there, it's burning right through the hull. I'm incredibly excited about this news, this great news about the successful testing of Athena, because it means that we'll be putting these powerful weapons soon. We could put them in the hands of our warfighters and give them even more powerful weaponry to keep themselves safe and also to deliver the effects that we need. They can be used, laser weapons can be used offensively and of course defensively too, to help protect our homeland. Think of our airports that might be under threat from enemy drones. They could be used to protect we could use them statically and used to protect our airports. They could be used to protect our power grid, our nuclear plants. So there's lots of different exciting applications for this technology. It is no longer science fiction, but science fact.
Many know that it is a farce. You know, there are honest scientists out there who will openly say that climate change is nonsense, that NASA fakes all this data, and all these scientists who are supposedly backing climate change, they're all being paid off, and that this is all fake science or pseudoscience. So what is going on with promoting this lie? Why are they doing that? Well, I will tell you, I honestly believe that they are trying to push a certain agenda. And I will get to that in just a minute. In the next scene of the trailer, you'll see more climate chaos, via extreme cold. So why is this constantly shown? As soon as I saw this scene, it really reminded me of the movie The Day After Tomorrow. I'm sure many of you remember this movie back from early 2000. I believe it was 2004. Of course, we saw New York City frozen over like crazy. There was a massive storm. Everything went cold. There was basically, I think, a worldwide storm that froze over everything, brought in tons of snow and ice. So really, we have been shown this climate chaos, or these crazy disasters caused by the climate. That's, of course, going to be blamed on humanity. The same kind of thing we have been shown for a very long time now.
From Washington Examiner, September 30th, 2019, Church of Sweden proclaims Greta Thunberg successor to Jesus Christ in resurfaced tweet. Notice, the Church of Sweden declared star climate activist Greta Thunberg to be an appointed successor to Jesus Christ in a 2018 tweet that resurfaced. This was in December 2018, that resurfaced in the wake of her speech before the United Nations. The Church of Sweden has a history of promulgating climate alarmism, and Greta Thunberg particularly, noting on their official website, when the Amazon burns, we gather to do what? To fight for Mother Earth together. The Church of Sweden is what? Is the largest Christian church in Sweden. So they gather together as the Amazon was burning, and to plead, to fight for what? Mother Earth. Spiritualism, nature worship that we have been seeing. And again, this is not just the Church of England. Evangelicals, the Christian churches now are getting on board with this whole climate change movement. And we have shown you even the Seventh-day Adventist General Conference and churches are joining this movement. Next article here. Notice, this is from Biblia Total News. Climate activist Greta Thunberg proclaimed successor of Christ by the Church of Sweden. September 28, 2019, the Church of Sweden believes that climate activist Greta Thunberg is the successor of Christ of this time due to her defense to the environment. The Church of Sweden, with Lutheran roots, affirmed through the social media, Twitter, that Thunberg and her discourse is the most similar image of Christ nowadays. Can you imagine Luther being present today and hearing these things? That the Church of Sweden, which has a Lutheran roots, is proclaiming Greta Thunberg as a successor of Christ. Is that what the reformers fought for? To proclaim a human being as a successor of Jesus Christ?
I will show you on the Georgia Guidestones exactly where you can find the adversary. So the first commandment on the Georgia Guidestones is to maintain humanity under 500 million in perpetual balance with nature. And nature is not there's the adversary right there. That's why Freemasons can tell you their secrets in books, because they don't think you understand them in the first place, so they're not afraid to tell you what their secrets are. But if you know who they're talking about, then there's a problem for them.
For beauty is eternal, and we bow to beauty everlasting. For lasting happiness, return to one alone, and she surrounds you now. Great nature, refuge of the weary heart, and only balm for breasts that have been bruised. She hath cool hands for every favored brow, and gentlest silence for the troubled soul. She counsels her most wise. She healeth well, having such ministries as calm and sleep. She is ever faithful. Other friends may fail, but seek ye her in any quiet place, Smiling, she will rise and give to you her kiss. So must ye come as children. Little children that believe nor ever doubt her beauty and her faith, nor deem her tenderness can change or die.
You know, many people have done videos, even showing the, I believe if you fold the $100 bill, you will see almost like a nuclear explosion or chaos coming through the streets of New York City, and it's been put to the same movie. This is a scene from Day After Tomorrow. You see the tsunami coming or the water coming. You see almost similar on the $100 bill. So really, I believe we are being shown this like crazy for a very long time now. And, you know, in this scene, I find interesting, check out, you know, the military and what are they wearing? Of course, they're all wearing their good old UN vests or UN peacekeepers. I believe this could be programming for, and predictive programming for FEMA camps, for the UN or One World Military or UN peacekeepers or worldwide peacekeepers, all this kind of thing. They are showing this one world police force or this one world order that is coming very, very soon. So next, in another scene, we see this major hailstorm taking place. You know, check out the size of that hailstone. It's massive, and it comes and literally destroys this bus. So does this remind you of something? Okay, this is the point that I'm going to get at, the main point, I believe, of this movie and of climate change. It just really hit me. I believe Abba Yahweh hit me with this in this past week as I was pondering and contemplating this movie over the weekend as to what I believe the real agenda is behind climate change. And, you know, when I saw this scene of this hailstone coming, it really reminded me of the judgments of Revelation. And, you know, let's just look at those judgments. You know, we see, you know, back in the book of Revelation, we have the 7 seals, we have the 7 trumpets, and we have the 7 bowls. And, you know, right from the 6th seal earthquake and on, the vast majority of the judgments have to do, I would say, in my opinion, seemingly with the climate or with the world, with the environment. You know, we see the first trumpet, the vegetation is struck. Okay, we see in the second trumpet, the seas are struck, you know, they become like blood. We see, you know, in the first one where the trees and the vegetation, the grass is burned up, the trees are burned up. Then the third third trumpet, the waters are struck, so a great star fell from heaven. It was called wormwood, and the springs and rivers and lakes were struck, and of course the seas were struck in the second trumpet. Then the fourth trumpet, the heavens were struck, the sun, moon, and stars only give a third of their light. So we can see major things going on with the climate, with the world, with the environment. Revelation 9, the fifth trumpet, locusts from the bottomless pit. Again, crazy stuff going on here. So, we can see there is a lot of things to do with the climate that we are being shown right in the book of Revelation. The judgments of God that are coming, in my opinion, have to do a lot with the climate or things to do with the earth. And then when we go to Revelation 16 and we see the bowl judgments, that shows like the foul and loathsome sores that come on people who have the mark of the beast. Then we see fully the seas turn to blood in the second bowl. Then fully we see all of the waters turn to blood, the rest of the waters, so the seas and the oceans, and then later on the rivers and the lakes, they turn to blood. Then men are scorched. The sun is given power to scorch men and the earth. So again, more climate stuff going on here. Then we've got even darkness and pain. We've got the Euphrates. The entire river dries up here. The river Euphrates, to allow the kings of the east to come to get together for the battle of Armageddon. And then of course we've got the earth utterly shaken. And of course in the seventh bowl we see great hail fall from heaven upon men, each hailstone about a weight of a talent, so 100 pounds. So massive hailstones that are falling, so similar to what is being shown here. So now that we have spoken about all these judgments in Revelation, from Revelation 8 and 9, Revelation 16, this is the point that I'm getting at. What do you think is the reason why this lie of climate change is constantly being pushed onto humanity? Well, here's a hint. Satan has to come up with a plan to hide the truth. Okay, so we know from the judgments of Revelation that a lot of stuff to do with the climate, whether it's seas and rivers turning into blood, whether it's the sun being given power to scorch mankind on the earth, whether it's rivers and entire rivers drying up, all that kind of thing. So they have to come up with something, and I will get to that in just a minute. But as we look at even at this scene, to me, this major globe earth and space programming going on here.
The Vatican has priests stationed here in these mountains who are doing research on space and even other inhabitable worlds.
So I'm a Jesuit priest, but here in Tucson we have a research base of the Vatican Observatory.
So the Vatican Observatory has ties that go back several hundreds of years. But why I find this story particularly interesting now is when I heard about it, I called my friend Dave. He's been a science journalist longer than I could possibly remember.
You mentioned this last week. I'd never heard of them before. I asked some people out here, and they basically said, what? Very few people, space journalists even. I just find that really weird.
I think the Vatican Observatory doesn't have a big press office like some of the rest of us do. So they came here when their site in Italy became too light polluted to really do forefront research. It didn't shock me when I found out that the Catholic Church was worried about dates and calendars. And what did surprise me was when I came here to Arizona and started meeting Vatican Observatory astronomers to find out that they also were interested in magnetic white dwarfs and asteroids and something more than just the calendar. That was cool, and that was a bit of a surprise. Yeah.
Wait till you find out about the Vatican astronomer saying he's operating with Project Lucifer. Okay, I promised you we would find out this great Catholic astronomer, the #1, is operating with something called Project Lucifer. What is that?
Well, up on top of Mount Graham in Arizona, there's an observatory complex that consists of 3 very high-powered telescopes. One is the Vatican Advanced Technology Telescope. There's a radio telescope, and then there's one called the Large Binocular Telescope. This is the most powerful telescope in the world. In fact, they told us they can get better images of space than the Hubble Space Telescope can. Now, attached to this telescope is an infrared camera named Lucifer, which is really a kind of an odd name for a camera. And You know, from the information that we gathered, this thing was named by the Max Planck Institute and some German astronomers, but the Vatican is part of this conglomerate up there, that they're all working together. Now, what this instrument's used for is astrobiology, for looking for exoplanets, looking for other worlds, and the infrared spectrum is also very useful for seeing things that can't be seen with the naked eye. And many UFO researchers have noted that you can see a lot of ships and entities that you normally can't see.
Tell me about what the Vatican astronomers are telling you, or what others, experts, I mean, you had a research team.
Right.
Tell me a few of the things they're telling
Well,
you.
first of all, the day that we spent on Mount Graham, the entire day there, we had the Jesuits speaking to us face to face. We also had systems engineers. It was astonishing, the access that they gave us. And one of the things we found amazing in the use of the Lucifer device and even the other telescopes is how commonly the astronomers spoke of UFOs. We were just taken back by the fact that it was almost a nuisance to them that there are so many.
This telescope, the Vatican Advanced Technology Telescope, it was the first of the new technology telescopes that has been considered pretty much the norm now in developing telescopes. With the advance of computer technology, we have the capability of bringing that advanced technology directly into our telescope. So it's an expandable, it's almost like it's a living machine.
You know, without infinite space, planets, and galaxies, they cannot have evolution and they cannot have climate change. It just wouldn't be possible, because evolution will be used, in my opinion, as we spoke of in previous videos, that it will be the lie to cover up the arrival of the fallen angels and their offspring, the Nephilim. That is what I believe evolution will be for, because again, we cannot have climate change or aliens from other planets or evolution if we live in an enclosed world, in an enclosed cosmology, which I truly believe the Bible speaks of. I do not believe in planets and solar systems and galaxies and all this other nonsense. No, the earth is the center. We are directly below God's domain, the third heaven. The second heaven is the waters above, which is the abode of the dragon and his fallen angels. And we are in the first heaven and the first earth. Here's where we are, and below us is Sheol. Then, of course, we got the pillars of the earth. So this is exactly how the Bible describes our world. And in fact, all of the ancient cultures as well describe the earth and the world in this same way. So I do not believe that we live on a spinning ball. I believe we live on a flat plane under a domed firmament. And so if we know that this is real, which I believe to be, then there's no way you can have climate change. There's no way you can have aliens from other planets. There's no way you can have evolution.
Although we weren't able to shatter that highest, hardest glass ceiling this time, thanks to you, it's got about 18 million cracks in it. And it may be hard to see tonight, but we are all standing under a glass ceiling right now. And the light is shining through like never before, filling us all with the hope and the sure knowledge that the path will be a little easier next time.
Force field. It's a dome. We're at the edge of the arena.
1,500 years ago, everybody knew the Earth was the center of the universe. 500 years ago, everybody knew the Earth was flat. And 15 minutes ago, you knew that people were alone on this planet.
Now, one thing I really want your generation to embrace is that the Earth is a closed system. We cannot leave the Earth. There's no place to go.
This is Johnny Cerrucci with another Mig-Mag special report. For 1,000 years, from roughly 500 AD to 1500 AD, the civilized world was controlled by Rome, but not military Rome, religious Rome. The Roman Empire had mutated from a military power into a religious one, co-opting the beliefs of Christianity and mixing them with ancient Egyptian, Greco, and Babylonian paganism. Christian doctrine that came directly from Jesus Christ and was transcribed in the Bible stated that each individual had the liberty and independence to govern their own salvation by cultivating a personal relationship with Jesus Christ. The new religious Roman Empire insinuated herself in between Christ and the believer and said if you wanted to have your soul saved, you had to rely on the priests, bishops, and cardinals of Rome. This was the worst kind of slavery because it was a slavery of disinformation. Now and again, sincere Bible-believing Christians like the Waldensians of the Alps, the Albigensians, Jerome of Prague, John Wycliffe and his Lollards, Jan Hus of Bohemia, would rebel against this Roman rule and show Christians that Vatican doctrines claiming that you needed Rome to ensure your salvation were contradicted by the Bible. As a result, the papacy strictly forbade Bibles to be placed into the hands of the common person and only allowed Jerome's Latin Vulgate to be handled by clergy. Men like John Wycliffe painstakingly translated the Vulgate into the language of the people. For Wycliffe, it was English. English Bibles were then slowly and carefully copied and handled by Wycliffe's followers, who handed them out to and taught the people. In response, Roman authorities captured Wycliffe's followers, called Lollards, tied their Bibles around their necks, and burned them alive. It's what so-called Christian Rome did to all of her enemies, including Jerome of Prague and Jan Hus. John Fox's Book of Martyrs, originally titled Acts and Monuments, is completely filled with examples of Catholic authorities torturing and murdering Christians. And when a Lollard was burned with a Bible hanging around his neck, it was a terrible loss, because not only were Christians being burned alive, but hand-copied Bibles were irreplaceable. But in 1517, a new rebel stepped up, an Augustinian monk from Germany named Martin Luther. Luther was furious that Pope Leo X, Giovanni de' Medici, from the powerful Medici family who helped to rule the world then and including through to today, had sent their attack dogs, the Dominicans, to cheat the common people out of their money by claiming they could buy what is called an indulgence, which is basically a receipt of forgiven sin. By paying money to indulgence peddlers like Johann Tetzel, poor Christians believed that they had some of their sins forgiven. Worse, they were told that dead loved ones were in purgatory, and they could give money to these indulgence peddlers, and the Pope would then release their dead loved ones. Luther wrote 95 short paragraphs or theses, and on November 1st of 1517, All Saints' Day, posted them to the doors of All Saints Cathedral in Wittenberg. But what was different about Martin Luther's protest and the protests of previous Christians was the movable type printing press of Johannes Gutenberg. The 95 theses were translated and replicated by the Gutenberg press and spread like wildfire. Martin Luther instantly shot to #1 on the Vatican hit list. Now remember, he was an Augustinian monk, but that didn't matter. He was waking people up and freeing them from the Roman chains, and for that he needed to be stopped. He was kidnapped by his benefactor, Frederick the Wise of Saxony, and held at Wartburg Castle for several months to protect him from Vatican assassins. During that time, he translated the Bible into vernacular German, and it may have been the most important thing he ever did, starting with the New Testament and then later the Old Testament. But now the Gutenberg press started printing off large quantities of common language Bibles, and the fires of the Inquisition couldn't keep up. Other brave Christians like William Tyndale, also a Roman Catholic priest, began translating Bibles into the language of their people. Tyndale was English like Wycliffe, and he too was eventually executed by Rome for his crime. But now Rome had a problem. There were too many Bibles and Bible translators to be kept in check by burning them all. A new tactic was born, a tactic that English Cardinal Thomas Wolsey called learning against learning. And that tactic was to discredit the Bible in order to force people to return to accepting Rome as the ultimate authority over their body and soul. In this tactic of learning against learning, Rome would literally rewrite reality and weave a false reality matrix that we now all swim in to this day. For thousands of years, mankind understood the earth to be flat and stationary. Only rarely did men like Pythagoras attempt to claim otherwise. And it's interesting to note that many Freemasons consider Pythagoras to be one of the first of their craft. But now rewriting our reality as a tactic to discredit the Bible became a top priority in the face of Martin Luther's 1517 Reformation, Protestant Reformation. The Catholic response would be the Counter-Reformation, and it would be spearheaded by a Spanish Templar knight named Ignatius of Loyola and his followers, whom we call today the Jesuits. Their first opportunity came from the Vatican's mathematician, a Polish priest named Nicholas Copernicus. Copernicus gave birth to the modern heliocentric model of the universe with his work De Revolutionibus Orbium Celestium, on the revolutions of the heavenly spheres. Copernicus knew he was weaving a matrix of lies and wanted to hold publication of De Revolutionibus until after his death. But powerful Roman Catholic clergy like Tiedemann Gies, Bishop of Culm, and the papal secretary himself, Johann Wiedmanstadt, forced him to publish in 1543. The facts that Catholic clergy forced Copernicus to publish, or that Copernicus was the Vatican mathematician, or that he received his doctorate in canon law from Bologna University. Canon law are the precepts by which Rome governs nations. Adam Weishaupt was a doctor in canon law. Or that he was a Roman Catholic priest. These have all been swept under the carpet. But Copernicus never married, and even the Catholic Encyclopedia had to note that in 1537 King Sigismund of Poland put Copernicus's name on the list of 4 candidates for the vacant episcopal seat of Ermland, which makes it probable that at least in later life he had entered the priesthood. Also swept under the carpet has been the timing of the publication of De Revolutionibus, right on the heels of Martin Luther's Protestant Reformation. And if that's not clear enough for you, how about this? A Vatican agent named Georg Joachim Redicus, who was originally born Georg de Porus, had insinuated himself into the Luther Reformation and was in Wittenberg when he left to become a close student of Copernicus. Sources like Wikipedia claim that Redicus was sent from reformer Philip Melanchthon, a dear friend of Martin Luther. But it is absolutely Roman Catholic disinformation. In the Table Talk of Martin Luther, the great reformer is quoted as having said, "There is talk of a new astrologer who wants to prove that the earth moves and goes round instead of the sky, the sun, the moon, just as if somebody were moving in a carriage or a ship might hold that he was sitting still and at rest while the earth and the trees walked and moved. But that is how things are nowadays. When a man wishes to be clever, he must needs invent something special, and the way he does it, he must needs be the best. The fool wants to turn the whole art of astronomy upside down. However, as Holy Scripture tells us, so did Joshua bid the sun to stand still, and not the earth." In his lectures on the book of Genesis, Luther said, "We Christians must be different from the philosophers in the way we think about the causes of these things. And if some are beyond our comprehension, like those before us concerning the waters above the heavens, we must believe them and admit our lack of knowledge rather than either wickedly deny them or presumptuously interpret them in conformity with our own understanding." The great reformer Jean Calvin, also known as John Calvin, called Copernicus a dreamer who has a spirit of bitterness and contradiction, reprove everything and prevent the order of nature. We will see some who are so deranged, Calvin said, not only in religion, but who in all things reveal their monstrous nature, that they will say that the sun does not move, and that it is the earth which shifts and turns. When we see such minds, we must indeed confess that the devil possesses them, and that God sets them before us as mirrors in order to keep us in his fear. So it is with all who argue out of pure malice, and that happily make a show of their imprudence. When they are told this is hot, they will reply, no, it is plainly cold. When they are shown an object is black, they will say, no, it is white, and vice versa. Just like the man who said that the snow is black, for although it is perceived and known all to be white, yet he clearly wished to contradict the fact. And so it is that they are madmen who try to change the natural order, and even to dazzle eyes and benumb the senses. Do you think Calvin knew how the Freemasons were used by the Jesuits? When they are shown an object as black, they will say it is white.
We're talking about our government here.
No, we're talking about a crime, Bill, pure and simple. Y'all got to start thinking on a different level, like the CIA does. Now, we're through the looking glass here, people. White is black, and black is white.
Very quickly, Rome jumped upon this new model of the universe, and Jesuits like Christopher Clavius used Copernicus and his work to fabricate the Gregorian calendar, the calendar we all use. Rightly did the prophet Daniel say in chapter 7, verse 23, that during his vision, a being standing near him said, "The fourth beast shall be a fourth kingdom on the earth, which shall be different from all other kingdoms, and shall devour the whole earth, trample it, and break it into pieces. The 10 horns are 10 kings who shall rise from this kingdom, and another shall rise after them. He shall be different from the first ones, and shall subdue 3 kings. He shall speak pompous words against the Most High, shall persecute the saints of the Most High, and intend to change times and laws. And the saints shall be given into his hand for a time." Very quickly did Rome and papal agents like the Jesuits begin to push this new cosmology. She took over astronomy and either pushed out or killed off anyone who contradicted the idea that the Earth was a globe spinning in space and revolving around the sun. Even those that met her halfway didn't keep her happy, and she dealt with them as well. Teague Ottenson Brahe, whose nickname was Tycho, accepted the idea that the Earth was a globe spinning in space, but still believed that his own observations and data proved that the Earth was the center of the solar system and not the sun. This is known as geocentrism. Tycho wanted to follow in the steps of Martin Luther and studied at the University of Wittenberg, but was forced out by the plague. Brahe's life appeared to be frequently in danger, and in 1566 he lost a large portion of his nose in a duel. He was 20 years old at the time. He later died under mysterious circumstances at the very young age of 54. One of those who claimed it was simply an illness, a bladder infection contracted during a banquet in Prague, was his understudy Johannes Kepler. Kepler was a German astronomer and supposedly a Lutheran, yet he had an intimate relationship with Jesuits. In 1597, Archduke Franz Ferdinand II of Austria banished all Protestants, good Roman Catholic that he was, and Kepler fled to Hungary. But the Jesuits intervened and convinced Ferdinand to allow him to return. Kepler grew up with a Jesuit uncle under the same roof of their house in Wilderstadt. Uncle Sidaldus was a Jesuit astrologer who also kept a wife. Upon the unexpected death of Tycho Brahe, Holy Roman Emperor Rudolf II immediately promoted Kepler to replace him as imperial mathematician, and Kepler very quickly went to work, rewriting all of Brahe's observations to be interpreted as heliocentric and not geocentric. In a paper titled Kepler's Relation to the Jesuits, Dr. Jörg Schuppner at the University of Leipzig noted that it is well known that the order of the Jesuits was the most important and the most active Catholic order in the field of science during the 17th and 18th centuries. One field of particularly intensive successful study carried out by the Jesuits was astronomy. Many of their names are associated with the important discoveries in the history of astronomy, such as the discovery and mapping of moon craters. It is nearly impossible to list all the names of those who made serious contributions as astronomers or mathematicians. One aspect of the considerable role the Jesuits played in the history of astronomy was their support of Johannes Kepler. Some of them stood in extensive correspondence with Kepler. Now, it was obvious to protesters like Luther and Calvin that something fishy was going on in Rome, and the papacy needed plausible deniability while she rewrote our reality. That propaganda was presented by Italian astronomer and mathematician Galileo Galilei, and it's absolutely fascinating what user-edited Wikipedia says. In the entry for Galileo Galilei, under the subtitle Galileo, Kepler, and Theories of Tides, Cardinal Bellarmine had written in 1615 that the Copernican system could not be defended without, quote, a true physical demonstration that the sun does not circle the earth, but the earth circles the sun. Galileo considered his theory of the tides to provide that required proof of the motion of the earth. Now, there's no link on the name Cardinal Bellarmine, which is unusual for Wikipedia. Maybe that's because Cardinal Bellarmine was Robert Bellarmine of the Society of Jesus, one of the most powerful Jesuits of his time, who was canonized as saint in 1930 and named a doctor of the church. What's more, it is ludicrous to imagine that the Earth's supposed large mass doesn't pull the moon and crash into it, and instead the magical force of gravity holds it stationary. Even more ridiculous is the idea that the moon affects tides by pulling on the water. Again, the magical, mystical force of gravity is blamed. South African author Thomas Winship wrote in 1899 his book Zetetic Cosmogony. If the moon lifted up the water, it is evident that near the land the water would be drawn away and low instead of high tide caused. Again, the velocity and path of the moon are uniform, and it follows that if she exerted any influence on the Earth, that influence could only be a uniform influence. But the tides are not uniform. And Winship uses examples from South Africa. At Port Natal, the rise and fall is about 6 feet, while at Beira, about 600 miles up the coast, the rise and fall is 26 feet. This effectually settles the matter that the moon has no influence on the tides. But Protestant reformers were on to Rome. She knew she needed a smokescreen, and she provided it. Suddenly, history was rewritten, and rather than pushing with her own agents, like Copernicus, Kepler, Galileo, and others, to rewrite our cosmology, suddenly, the papacy was a defender of the flat earth. Well, just look what they did to poor Galileo. Let's do. Supposedly, Galileo was tried for heresy at the hands of that evil flat earther, Jesuit Robert Bellarmine. He bravely stood by his guns and humiliated the church with a heliocentric spinning ball earth. What happened to Galileo Galilei? Well, for the last few years of his life, he was put under house arrest. Have you read anything about the Inquisition? Do you know what the Inquisition did to people when it truly considered them an enemy? Things like rotating their arms backwards until they were pulled out of their sockets, inventing special instruments that could be jammed into a person's body to rip open their bowels, putting them in a special sarcophagus filled with spikes that would jam into them to the bone. Did you ever hear of Edgar Allan Poe? Are you familiar with his short story, The Pit and the Pendulum? About a swinging, razor-sharp pendulum that lowered across a victim and would take hours to slowly saw that victim in half. Did you know it was based upon the Inquisition? A little-known secret is that the Jesuits now own astronomy. When their missionaries went across the world, across our flat earth, the first thing they did was insinuate themselves in royal courts to become the official astronomer of that kingdom. China is a great example. One of the first Jesuits in China was Matteo Ricci, Ricci and his successors like Adam Schall and Ferdinand Verbiest were all the royal court astronomers and eventually fabricated the calendar for the Chinese emperor. Today, the Jesuits even have their own observatories both in Italy and in America. They use their puppets in American government to steal Apache holy ground on Mount Graham in Arizona. Are they reaching out extraterrestrially or interdimensionally? They appear to have answered our question with the latest piece of technology on Mount Graham, the Large Binocular Telescope Near-Infrared Utility with Camera and Integral Field Unit for Extragalactic Research, also known as Lucifer. And it's not surprising given the success the Jesuits have had in rewriting our reality. Now, we're supposed to believe that Rome was against the spinning ball Earth heliocentric cosmic accident cosmology of our modern understanding. Yet at every step of the way, Jesuits or Jesuit agents were there to bolster our false reality, hiding whenever possible behind convenient Jews. And for more on that, see our special report, It's the Jews, from Johnny Cerrucci and Migmag. Needing to contrive an origin for our accidental existence that contradicts the Bible. Jesuit-trained Belgian priest Georges Lemaitre is the father of the so-called Big Bang Theory, the idea that first there was nothing and then it exploded. He was a close co-worker of just such a Jewish puppet, Albert Einstein. Einstein bolstered the Jesuit cosmology with his convoluted theory of relativity. The problem was that observations of both scientists and laymen weren't matching what so-called astronomers were telling us. And so Einstein fabricated the theory of relativity to claim that your reality was relative to the time-space continuum. It is purposefully almost impossible to understand. You're just supposed to trust science and astronomy. The Jesuits then jumped on with dinosaurs and Charles Darwin to claim the Earth is billions of years old. And wherever Darwin's theory of evolution had holes, Jesuits stepped up to fill the gap. Jesuits like Pierre Teilhard de Chardin, the father of the New Age, after fabricating the ape-like pre-humans that we supposedly came from, even students of evolution became concerned that there was a, quote, missing link between primitive apes and modern humans. A discovery was made in 1912 to bridge that gap. Having been found in Piltdown, East Sussex, England, it was named Piltdown Man. Unfortunately, it was also found to be a hoax. The skull of a small human with the altered mandible and teeth of an orangutan. Sometime later, paleontologist Stephen Jay Gould uncovered the father of that hoax, a Jesuit priest named Pierre Teilhard de Chardin. There are many such examples in archaeology and paleontology, and yet no one asks, why would so-called scientists be fabricating evidence? The goal was to discredit the Bible, and it has been resoundingly successful. Without the spinning ball Earth, Darwinian dinosaur cosmic accident, the Bible is a science textbook. With it, critics laugh and question the Bible, and instead look to human authorities to save their souls, such as the Vicar of Christ himself, who is for the first time in Roman Catholic history a Jesuit priest.
When a man reaches the edge, after he goes as far as any man can possibly go, how how does his son continue?
I believe evolution will be the way they usher in the Nephilim coming on the scene one day, the giants and the offspring of the fallen angels. They will use that, just as we saw in movies like X-Men, that, oh, it's the evolution of man, that man is changing into something else now, that man is evolving into something else. They're definitely going to use evolution to push that lie. And climate change, I believe, this is what the Lord hit me with this past week. It will be the lie used to cover up the judgments of God on mankind. You'll remember even movies like Deep Impact or Armageddon, showing an asteroid hitting the earth, same kind of thing that we see in Revelation 18, where an angel hurls a boulder or a millstone onto the earth. So same kind of thing. This Deep Impact propaganda and Armageddon shown, I believe, is covering up Revelation 18, that the angel is going to throw this millstone. These judgments are going to come directly from heaven. It will literally be God and his army raining down these judgments on the earth because of man's sin, because of man's disobedience and his wickedness. But the devil has to come up with his lie in order to cover up what is truly going on here. So that's what I believe is happening. I believe that just like we've seen in Day After Tomorrow or even Deep Impact, it is all propaganda to hide the truth from humanity. Because in my opinion, if the establishment engineers this stuff first, then it'll kill two birds with one stone. They'll be able to usher in the New World Order, the martial law, FEMA camps, depopulation, etc. So that's one part of the coin. The other part of the coin is that when God's true judgments, his trumpet and bowl judgments, start raining down on this earth, because people have already been programmed for climate change, the devil and his people will be able to pass off to humanity that, oh, it's just climate change again. When they start seeing the waters turn to blood, when they start seeing men being scorched on the earth, when they start seeing the fish and the trees burned up, the grass burned up, when they start seeing the sun and moon and stars being struck and only given a third of its light, all these kinds of things, they will believe, or humanity will believe, that it's just climate change. So this is what I believe these lies are being propagated to us so much for this climate change, because the devil has to come up with a story to hide the fact that these judgments are going to come from God. So if he can engineer it through all of this technology, whether it's through HAARP or what have you, if they can engineer these kinds of disasters, which I fully believe they can to some extent, obviously they probably won't be as bad as the judgments that come from God himself, but they will put it into the minds of people that, oh, it's just climate change, there's more climate change that's going on, and that's how they will fool the people. Because, I mean, they do an excellent job of this CGI. I mean, it looks really good. You got to give kudos really to their animation team. But remember, Satan can only use lying signs and wonders to fool everyone. That is what I believe is going on with this movie, that God's judgments are coming, but Satan must bring his lies first.
We know that they use the Hegelian dialectic of thesis, antithesis, and solution to bring about their desired changes upon society in ways which would seem natural and without suspicion to the ignorant and unobservant eye. In 1968, the Club of Rome met at Rockefeller's private estate in Bellagio, Italy. This think tank's job was to invent a crisis which would have a programmed response, to which they would then offer their pre-planned and long-awaited solution. This is how they bring order out of chaos, or as they love to call it, ordo ab chaos. Their purpose was to find a way to unite humanity in a common cause, and the catalyst for this unity would need to be an artificially created disaster of global scope and with global consequences. They came up with the idea of climate change. The Club of Rome claimed, "We are facing an imminent, catastrophic, ecological collapse, and our only hope is to transform humanity into a global interdependent, sustainable society based on respect and reverence for the earth." They believe humanity is the cancer, and in order to heal, Earth needs to purge herself of this disease. Overpopulation is said to be the cause of all Earth's current ills and woes. On 22nd of April 1970, Earth Day was first celebrated, harnessing the anti-war, anti-authoritarian, and anti-religious feelings of the Vietnam protesters and redirecting their rage and energy into a new cause to fight for, a new enemy to stand against, and a new religion to believe in, that of Mother Earth. In 1972, the Club of Rome published Limits to Growth, the Plan for Sustainable Development and the Remedy for Overpopulation. Voluntary sterilization, abortion, and euthanasia are culling means they hope people will, through re-education and brainwashing, choose for themselves. Vaccinations, weather modification, 5G and frequency technologies are a part of this hidden, nefarious plan of silent weapons warfare on the people of this earth. People will be moved from rural areas to large, smart cities for the sake of better control and monitoring. Urban life will be sold as green and eco-friendly, and fires and droughts and hurricanes will force people to make this move voluntarily. Morris Strong and Mikhail Gorbachev, both co-authors of the Earth Charter and Agenda 21, have called for the collapse of industrialized society and the end of national sovereignty. Gorbachev stated, "My hope is that this charter will be a kind of 10 commandments." The Georgia Guidestones are just what he was talking about. Built in 1979 on a hill in Alberton, Georgia, they were commissioned and paid for by an anonymous donor who used the pseudonym R.C. Christian. They are 21-meter tall granite stone slabs with guides or commandments written on them in 8 different languages. They call for a new world order and a new world religion. Their prevailing theme is unity against climate destruction and the need to reduce the world population to 500 million people. Pope Francis has lent his hand to this fight. In his Save the Earth letter, he wrote that the earth, our sister, our mother, is in a crisis because of our harm to her, inflicted through our greed, materialism, and consumerism. He called for swift action and change of lifestyles, while the earth cries and the poor suffer. He claimed that the environment crisis was a moral and ethical imperative.
How art thou fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning? How art thou cut down to the ground, which didst weaken the nations? For thou hast said in thine heart, I will ascend into heaven. I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. I will sit also upon the mount of the congregation in the sides of the north. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. I will be like the Most High. Yet thou shalt be brought down to hell, to the sides of the pit.
This know also, that in the last days perilous times shall come. For men shall be lovers of their own selves, covetous, boasters, proud, blasphemers, disobedient to parents, unthankful, unholy, without natural affection, truce breakers, false accusers, incontinent, fierce, despisers of those that are good, traitors, heady, high-minded, lovers of pleasures more than lovers of God, having a form of godliness, but denying the power thereof. From such turn away.
And because iniquity shall abound, the love of many shall wax cold.
Let no man deceive you by any means, for that day shall not come except there come a falling away first.